party people. I am very excited today. We are sitting down for a very special, very candid interview conversation, sort of a inside the podcaster studio to talk about, 10 years of Party of One. I am joined here today by my dear, dear friend, Alex Flanigan. Alex, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Jeff, it is a delight. I am such a big fan of Party of One. I'm such a big fan of your work. Obviously, you know this. But more importantly, I'm a big fan of you. And I am so delighted for the opportunity to do this. When we started talking about it, I know that there have been a handful of complex reactions over the years to the concept of Party of One as an interview show. But I think that the interview is one of the greatest extant art forms that exists in like the long arc of human history. And I love a good interview. So I've always kind of wanted to try my hand at doing one. I think it's a real skill that not everybody has. And I'm curious to find out if I have it. But I was so delighted, so honored when you invited me to do this that, I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
I truly, for context, I had this idea about 7 days ago. And like I've been, this particular anniversary has been kind of looming because it's a big one. Like this is a milestone date, and I was like, what should I do? And when I was like, oh, it would be really cool to like have like a sit down interview and we just like talk about. I was like, who would I want to sit down with? And like one name popped into my head before all others. And that was about the moment that you got a text message saying, hey, I got this idea. I got this idea. If you're down for it, we can make it happen.
I think one of the greatest feelings in the world is being the first person to hear about an idea. That's just one of the greatest honors I think that a creative person can give you. And it's even better when that idea is, hey, what if you did a cool thing? So, that's awesome. That's really peak. But yeah, to your point, though, 10 years is a very long time. It's a big anniversary. And I feel like something that's very interesting to me is that 10 years is not just a comparatively long time in the life of one podcast. It's a significant chunk of time in podcasting as an art form. So your arc with Party of One has really been set alongside the arc of this industry as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you have some really interesting insights to share on that. But one thing I was curious about that I think would be a good place to start, what is the first podcast you remember listening to or hearing?
That's a really great question. The first podcast I remember really sitting down with would have been 2010-ish. The first one I really remember like grasping onto would have been probably The Art of Wrestling with Colt Cabana.
Interesting. Okay.
This would have been around 2012-ish, I think. Probably would have been one of the first one that we really like got into. Jen and I both had gotten into wrestling in a big way and gotten into indie wrestling in a big way, and hearing interviews with the various wrestlers that we were seeing on shows. Like that was the starting point. Like I think I had been sort of maybe loosely aware of podcasts before that, but that was the one that I distinctly latch onto as the earliest memories I have of seeking out a show, sitting down with it, listening to it, taking it in, and sort of like tuning into it on a weekly basis. And then One Shot probably would have come about a year and a half after that of just kind of randomly stumbling into it.
Mm-hmm. And how did that stumble happen? Did you come to One Shot by way of podcasts or by way of gaming?
I came to One Shot by way of podcasts and by way of I was a very my background in my life to some extent belongs to superhero comic books. This is a well-documented phenomenon. And I had been a very big fan of the website Comics Alliance and their sort of weekly comic book coverage. And one of the earliest one-shot arcs had Chris Sims from Comics Alliance and from the War Rocket Ajax podcast as the guest on the episode. And I heard the premise of like, oh, we're going to be playing a table to like, we're going to be playing D&D. And I was like, oh, I would like to hear that. That sounds fun. And by the end of the first episode, I was like, it's funny. I remember listening to the episode twice because the first time I listened to it, It's very much the Homer drives by the billboard for Clown College of like, I listened to it first and I was like, this feels weird. I don't feel like I'm supposed to be listening to a bunch of people play role-playing games. This doesn't feel like a thing that's like for me to hear. And then I re-listened to it again and I was like, oh, this is going to rewrite the entire arc of my life, isn't it? I was like, this is going to change me on a fundamental level.
So at what point in that process did the spark of this occur to you that this was a thing that you could see yourself doing?
That probably didn't come until kind of two things happened in unison, I think. Or really, I'd say even like there's like 3 or 4 sort of a convalescence of life things all occurred that sort of put this into perspective, and really like it sits on Jen's shoulders more than anybody's. Like all kind of in rapid succession. I had heard the first episodes of Star Wars Campaign, a podcast that is deeply important to me and really is the thing that I point to as the podcast that made me want to make podcasts. Hearing that and hearing Kat's storytelling on the show and hearing the story involved in those very specific ways, like that was the thing that made me really understand like what could be accomplished, like what actual play could be, as opposed to, oh, this is just a fun premise for like one podcast, being like, oh, there's a whole genre and a whole medium here that I think is worth exploring. As that is happening, there are 2 other life details that are occurring, which are I am becoming dissatisfied at my job, and our dear friend Noah comes to me and says, hey, Jeff, I have a podcast. I'm expanding this into a podcast network. Do you have shows you would like to pitch me for that network? Like,
serendipity.
Pure serendipity. And I was like, I don't really. At the time, my immediate response was like, not really. I was like, I'm not a podcaster. Actually, I did pitch a show, and there are 3 episodes that are hidden. I don't know if they still exist out in the world. I should look into this, but we did record 3 episodes of a podcast on a premise that I think still is very funny, but fully went nowhere. But like there are 3 episodes of Hidden Jeff podcasts out in the world for people to hunt. This is me announcing this like I am declaring that the One Piece exists. Like they're there if you can find them. But as we're like sitting with this, I pitched this like wrestling podcast to my friend Noah, but at the same time, Jen says to me, hey, we have been looking into 2-player role-playing games for a while. Ever since we really moved in together, we've been looking into games that the 2 of us can play together. What if you did something like One Shot where you played games with people, but you did it with just all 2-player games? She was like, you have all of these games. You're looking for excuses to play them. Why not do that on a podcast? And that was the birth of Party of One. Like that was, I think I sent that email off to my friend Noah later that week of like, hey, I got this idea. Here's what I'm thinking. Originally, I may or may not still have the email, but I believe originally it was pitched as sort of a, can you escape like a D&D dungeon by yourself without an adventuring party? And the idea was like, can you survive the experience? And like as you can tell now, that chunk of the idea did not last. But I pitched this idea, like Noah and I bounced around this idea, and Jen and I bounced around this idea, and then almost immediately we got a text message from our friend that said, hey, the podcast network has completely fallen through, so sorry. And by that point, we had like Jen and I had like a fleshed out concept that we were like, hey, I think we could work with this. Like, I think that we were like, what if we just tried it? What if we just tried it? The exact conversation I remember having, and I remember having it partially because I've believe it was the day that I was slightly hit by a car.
Oh, okay.
Is
Slightly hit by a car is the best way to be hit by a car. Second to
right?
not at all, but
Great. Truly, I got grazed because a car took a left turn too fast, and I was like, I didn't knock me off my feet, but it definitely, like, I felt it brush against me, and I was like, hey, I think that guy hit me. I was like, hey, I think I just got hit by a car. And then
which of course caused you to reevaluate your entire life and your standing within it. And that turned you to podcasting.
Yeah. At that moment, I saw all of the future laid out in front of me. And I said, niche podcasting is the future.
I didn't expect that we would get a future Jeff origins in this interview, but this is beautiful.
We figured it out. I'm glad. It took 10 years to reveal the hidden lore, but we got there. So we had this conversation, and I remember saying to Jen, and we both kind of agreed. We were like, we're going to do this until we get bored or burnt out. Like, we're going to try this. If we get bored of it, then we kill it. Like, this is going to be a thing that we do until we stop being excited by it or stop having fun with it. And well, here we are.
Yeah, I think that kind of agreement, the sort of podcast prenup that you have to sign before you start doing a show like this, is actually the key to the success of a show, honestly. And I think that that's sort of where I find the most interesting piece of this balance to be, that you have to know going into something like this what it is that you are hoping to get out of it, obviously. But I think more importantly, you need to know what you're not willing to sacrifice for it. And I know that you and I have had this conversation before about like hard no's and hard yeses, but I think that is such an interesting piece of it. And I think that honestly, kind of knowing that up front, what you're not willing to put on the line for the success of a project, is such a mature artistic perspective that takes a long time to develop, really. It's so easy to get caught up, especially in your early artistic career, with this idea that if you are not willing to sacrifice absolutely everything to make this dream work, then what is your dream actually worth to you? Like, do you actually care about this at all? Do you actually want to be doing this? And of course, the answer is yes. But you have to kind of get out of that early stage notion of, this is worth sacrificing everything for. Because the truth is, it's not. If there are some things that have to be more important to you than, making a 2-player gaming podcast. But I digress. I think that it's so interesting that this story unfolds the way that it does. Because I think there's this real tendency as human beings and as storytellers to want to make the past make more sense than it made in the moment, and sort of to knit these pieces together. And as you're talking about this, how, the first podcast that you listened to and fell in love with was an interview podcast, and how you then came to this gaming and you came to this like very natural evolution of Party of One being born out of this intimate experience with this person that you loved and lived with, about how you could share this thing together. And yet when you went to make that pitch, it wasn't Party of One as it currently stands. It was how do you make a jigsaw trap for yourself in D&D? Yeah. Which is kind of the antithesis of what I think Party of One actually is. And it's just funny that it didn't arrive neatly at a conclusion that seems so obvious now. But I love that it did eventually sort of fall into that category. So circling back to something you said earlier, you mentioned how listening to Campaign Star Wars really kind of helped you to envision and understand what this medium could be, or what actual play as a medium could be. And I'm really curious to know, what is that to you? What do you think the genre can be at its best?
Damn. We made it. We're what, 15 minutes in, and I'm stumped. It's, to me, there is like a magic. Like there's a magic. It's not quite like actual play is weird because it's not quite any of the things that directly connect to it. People point to it as improv, but like I don't really think it's improv. I think there's a difference. There's a difference to it in even its most improv-y forms, where like there is there are similarities and there is improv within it, but it's a circle and a square. Like there's something different that occurs. And this kind of gets at, I think, maybe what I think tabletop gaming is, or what I think role-playing games as an activity are, and what I think, I think there is something beautiful to experiencing this, whether as hashtag content or not, I think there is something genuinely beautiful about the sort of simultaneous ritual imagining and creation of a shared imagination space.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that activity is a genuine source of magic in this world. That two or more of us will sit down and reach a point where we are imagining the same thing at the same time, and creating a space and creating a world that exists only in our shared imagination and only in our shared conversation. And it will be made of our conscious and subconscious wants and delights and desires, and all, like, that is beautiful and fascinating. That thing that is created, that, like, metaphysical object that is created when we do this, feels, you know, I've done some improv, I've done a lot of these related things. I've done professional wrestling, and, like, the things that I would point to and say actual play or tabletop games are adjacent to this, like, there is a difference in feeling, and even as I see the same sort of, like, magic there, like, there's a difference in feeling to it. And I think actual play feels to me like an opportunity to preserve this metaphysical object that we've created. If what we are doing is creating a shared imagination space, actual play or any kind of, like, preservation effort is the act of crystallizing this thing and holding on to it and presenting it in a way that other people can experience it, and being invited into a room where this object is displayed is, to me, a beautiful thing.
I love that. I think that's really fascinating. You kind of answered two different pieces of this question at the same time in a way that I'm really interested in and intrigued by. I think that when we talk about actual play, there is something in it that people go to, obviously, the idea of the actual work that goes into the creation of the product, which is, you know, sharing this improvised game together and doing that. But what you also talked about here is the other piece of that, of course, which is that you are ending up with a product. And I think that's interesting because there are a number of people who start to create actual play podcasts or consume actual play content. And I think what the actual thing that they want is not to create an actual play podcast, it's to play a game with their friends. And I think that happens all the time. What I'm really interested in then is the fact that your answer to this does include that creation of something in the process as a core piece of that process to you, which I think is really interesting. It sort of gets into another question I wanted to ask you, which is that, and I think this is interesting too, because you have an amount of perspective on this historically that I don't necessarily have. I wasn't in the game as long as you were, but there was this conversation that was ongoing at sort of the peak of a lot of actual play podcasting, or not the peak, but the crest of it, I think, where podcasting was discussed as being this medium that had a uniquely low barrier to entry. Do you remember this phrase going around all the time? Because I do. Low barrier to entry. And I think that is obviously, I have spent several years of my life, pushing back against the idea of elitism in art. I think that art that anybody can make is so crucial to getting back to the purpose that art needs to fulfill in a society. But I don't necessarily think that art being easy to do is the right reason to do it, right? So I'm always intrigued when somebody talks about podcasting with a respect for the actual medium itself, because I think that really the idea that podcasting has a uniquely low barrier to entry precludes a lot of people from taking the jump and doing the thing that they want to do in the medium they actually want to do it in, whether that's make their own short film or start a painting or like draw a webcomic, something like that. But podcasting as a genre is as a medium, rather, not even a genre, as a medium, is a different thing. So what do you think that podcasting as medium does uniquely well? What do you think the good reason is to make something as a podcast and not as something else?
I have a lot of answers to this question. I'm glad that it has come up. Thank you for asking it. This is a topic that I have thought about tremendously. And to your point, to your point, I'm glad that you pointed that out because I didn't even really fully like grasp that. Yes, like having a finished thing and having that finished product be a podcast was a part of the inception point of the show, and like is to this day a very important thing, and gets at something that I think I treasure about the show, and something that has been pointed out to me is that like I view my role within the show as being a host. I am a host. I am a
Mhm.
show host specifically, and I think that sets Party of One apart from a lot of actual play. And something that has been pointed out to me as setting Party of One is that it feels like a show, and it feels like a show with a host. And like that to me is significant. And to me, part of the two things that I think like podcasting, whether it is scripted or unscripted, whether it is, uh comforting and friendly or serious, or anything in the anything between, like the things that I think podcasting really brings to the table are it the conversation, like that, like you are fundamentally, I say this knowing every podcasting adjacent conversation that I have had in the last year, and I am saying this with all the bile that I've held on to with every one of
Mhm.
these
Mhm.
conversations. You are hearing an audio medium. It is an audio first medium. Podcasting, if you are engaging with a podcast, the thing you are engaging with most urgently, the thing you are engaging with in the forefront, regardless of the role of video, which is a whole other conversation that I have a lot of very angry feelings about. But
Sure, understood.
you're engaging with audio first and foremost. It is an audio medium. It is a medium for listening, and it is a medium that means that you are grounded in what is being said, what is being spoken. You are grounded in those conversations, and you are also grounded in hearing the voice of someone, and hearing and that, like that connection to someone at that level is also significant, and that kind of intimacy and authenticity and relationship. I mean, there is an inherent parasociality to podcasts that I think
Sure.
is a necessary thing to acknowledge. But like you are hearing a conversation first and foremost. You are hearing someone say words. You are hearing someone communicate. You are hearing someone communicate with you, and you are having those reactions to it. And I think that is, to me, what podcasting does, what it does well. And like the podcasts over the years that I have really like gravitated towards and that have really spoken to me are the ones that use that space in really interesting ways and like lean into that. And I think that is also part of what has made it easy to come back to Party of One again and again and again over those 10 years, is those are very aligned with what like is bringing me to tabletop games and play, is these moments of conversation and these moments of connection. Connection, I think, is an even a bigger word, of like these moments of connection, these moments of conversation, the space that we share by communicating with one another is powerful and significant. And like when I sit down and I think I want to make something in this space, what I'm really thinking of is like, what is the conversation that I want to be having? What is the story that I want to be telling? And what am I looking to convey to the audience? Like, what am I trying to say first and foremost? And like, that is the thing that I really hover around in podcasting.
Let's dig in on that a little bit. To what extent do you feel like you have control over, or I guess, to what extent do you feel you have construction over the Jeff Stormer that makes it past the cutting room floor? Like, and I don't just mean in the sense that, do you edit your podcast? I mean in the sense that there is this inherent vulnerability in the type of work that you do. There's an inherent vulnerability in like you said earlier, inviting someone into that shared imaginative space with you, that feels like a very vulnerable thing. The act of creation is a very vulnerable thing. The act of an interview is a very vulnerable thing. All of those things together, performed in a space where in actual play, there is kind of a very gray line in between you as the person and you as the character that you're putting forward and creating in real time, that sort of can, to your point, build on and benefit from, but also get kind of wrapped up in this parasociality, which is not an inherently negative thing. But to what extent do you feel like the Jeff that is on display in this show is an intentional, controlled, constructed thing versus just, this is 100% real, unfiltered, authentic, individual me?
I think the interesting thing about the show, this is such a good question. And we have made it almost 28 minutes exactly before I get to hit the Jeff Stormer answer of it's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, like, I think the interesting thing about the show and about the format and about the experience, and especially as I really lean into pitching it as an interview first and foremost and talking about it in the context of interviews as opposed to in the context of performance or storytelling or any of the other things, I think the interesting thing is there are areas or moments or angles by which I can try to present that controlled vision
Mm-hmm.
of that controlled, revised, honed picture of Jeff to an audience. But I think the really interesting thing about the show and what I really like, what stands out to me is that the same thing that I always say is true of the guest experience on Party of One, which is by way of playing this game together. We're not going to do, we're not really, we might ask one or two like interview adjacent questions, especially in the first like 10 minutes of an episode as we're just chatting. But like most of the experience is really that by playing this game together, by having this experience, by doing, as you say, a very vulnerable thing, I'm getting the guest is letting down their guard and is showing off who they are when their guard is down and when their creative impulses are fully at play. And what I think is really interesting about the format of the show is that that's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what I think is really compelling about the show, and what is, I think, honestly also really challenging about the show, is that element of it, if it's going well, like if I'm doing my job well, I've created a space where I can't hide.
Right.
Like where I have to show an authentic self, in part because it's going to let the guests let down their guard, but also it's the nature of the experience is one that is designed to let down both of our guards and show a version of ourselves where we are both at play, where both of our creative impulses are flying free, and that makes it much harder to control or present that version of self. And there are things that, so I think like there is an extent to which it is done by virtue of the extent by which I am drawing out the guest, right? Like when choosing games that I am comfortable with and choosing guests that are the people that I want to be speaking with, like there's a control there. But at the heart of things, like that control falls away very quickly when we're both in the throes of this moment where our vulnerable selves are going to be exposed in a way that is maybe more vulnerable than a lot of other more controlled experiences that I've been a part of.
I want to circle back to that because that is an interesting part of your process that I want to talk about in more depth. But before we do you ever feel like that vulnerability or that rawness or that process, that discomfort, has become a product that you owe to your audience or an obligation rather than a choice you're making or an appeal of the show?
If anything, I would say I feel the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I think that especially in the last year, 2 years, especially like in the last few years, I think what I've really come to as I evolve how I vision the show and what I get out of the show or what I want to be getting out of the show. I think the
Mm-hmm.
thing that I have realized is that vulnerability is not an obligation, but is the aspiration.
Mm. Okay.
And the moments of the show where I feel disappointed, the episodes that I would point to and say, I didn't hit the mark on this one, are not because I'm not delivering it to the audience, but because I'm listening to the audio and going, I didn't get to where I wanted to go.
Mm.
I think what it really has evolved into is like a personal want of that. Like it's I want to get to that place. The episodes that, to be blunt and candid and vulnerable, because that's the nature of this interview, the episodes of the show that I've listened to and I've gone like, yeah, this feels like a sales pitch. Like this feels like a tech demo. This feels like we are showing off a set of mechanics and not getting to like a sort of vulnerable place where we're really letting our guards down and sort of like letting the play happen and letting ourselves get lost in the experience. Those are the ones where I'm like, I don't feel like I hit that. Not from I don't feel like I gave the audience what they wanted, but because I don't feel like I gave myself what I am trying to get out of the show. So I don't see it as an obligation to the audience as much as I see it as an obligation to myself.
Mm-hmm.
In part because like we've had audience members come to me and say like, oh, I really liked this episode. It was really cool hearing this game get played. And I'm like, yeah, it was fine. But like, I would never point to it as an episode that like spoke to me because I heard it and I was like, I don't feel like I'm in that heightened zone. I don't feel like I'm in that energy.
Well, then what's the highest praise you feel you can receive as feedback on an episode of Party of One?
That's a great question. I think,
or if there's a specific example of like a piece of feedback that someone has given you after an episode that has really stuck with you.
There's two halves of this, and I'm finding sitting down and thinking about this, one half is much harder than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know the feedback that I've gotten that really stuck with me, or that really, like, the immediate answer that I have, and the immediate answer of, like, the feedback that really gets to me in a positive way, comes from the guests themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story that I've included in many of my pitch emails, and in part because it is a piece of feedback that really got me. Was we recorded with a guest who had never played a tabletop role-playing game before.
Uh-huh.
He's a nonfiction podcaster. Is connected through some podcasting friends. And
can we name the guest? Is this positive?
Yes.
This is a positive story.
Yeah, this is a positive story. This is our game where we played Merry Mutations and Marvelous Musicians. I believe that's the name of the game, with Aaron Joy, who produced what was the name of the show? Hold on, now I need to remember the name of the show, but we're leaving this in while I pull up my the frequency with which I get deep into a story, and then like having a really deep search function on my website's great, even if it kills me. Aaron Joy, host and narrator of Even If It Kills Me, was like a narrative documentary nonfiction podcaster. And when we sat down to play, he had played like computer role-playing games, like video games, but never a tabletop game like this. Like it was a completely new experience. Mm-hmm. And when we sat down, he was like, I really don't know what to expect. He's like, I have nothing. He's like very nervous. And, I chose a game that was really specific about music and about the experience of being a touring musician and like traveling and talking about the experience of being on tour and being an artist and all these things. because I knew that I wanted the conversation to hover around that, and that was going to be the thing that was going to get him what he wanted out of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And we played this game, and you can hear him fall in love with the experience in real time. And I got an email not 5 minutes after we finished recording. He sent me over the audio file, and then, like, 5 minutes after he sends me his audio, sends me a second email. Also, I need to say, I think I've become immediately addicted to this kind of storytelling, and, like, I think that this is going to change my life.
Yeah, that's pretty significant feedback, I would say.
And, like, having another episode, we recorded with Travis Huckabee, who was a professional wrestler, and I saw Travis at a wrestling show, like, a year and a half later. And we were chatting, and, like, I walk by, and he sees me, and he, like, waves me over. And we chat for a minute, and he goes, I need to say something to you real quick. He's like, I have been in a D&D game now for a year and a half, and that was entirely because I did your show and had such an experience with it that I, like, sought this out. And I was like, yeah. Like, that, to me, like, that feedback from guests where, like, they have this experience and it's not just, hey, I had a cool recording, I promoted my game or my podcast or my product, but, like, I had an experience that resonated with me and exposed me to something that really, like, changed me in a way. Like, that, to me, like, that is special. And I think that, like, and that's one angle of to answer your question from one angle, but, like, in terms of, like, listener feedback, I think it's a much tougher thing, and I think it is really, to me, I think the feedback that really hits is hearing people feel like they've gotten lost in the experience with us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, there is a kind of feedback that, like, I appreciate academically or intellectually, but that, like, doesn't fill my heart in the same way, which is, like, I get a lot of feedback, or I get a lot of praise of the show from people that say, like, this show features a lot of indie games, and I use it to learn games, and I use it to, like, check out a game before I buy it. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, that's nice. I'm glad that that's happening, and, like, I appreciate that the show is fulfilling something for you, but, like, it always feels a little, what's the word? Functional?
Mm-hmm.
It feels a little functional is the word I'm keep coming back to, but, like, I think the feedback of, like, somebody here going, like, yeah, I was listening to this episode and I got lost in it, and, like, or this moment made me cry, or, like, it's having that emotional reaction to this experience that we're having. I think it's when it gets to the emotional as opposed to the intellectual is where I would land in this answer to this question for me, as far as the listener goes, is, like, I want you to have an experience as well. I want the listener to, I always say when I'm listening that the thing that really speaks to me is when I'm listening to a piece of the episode and I, as listener, feel like I'm hearing something that I'm not supposed to be hearing.
Mm-hmm.
When I feel like I'm hearing something that is so intimate to me, to past me and the guest,
Right.
that present me is like, this feels like I am eavesdropping on something. And, like, when I get a response like that from a listener of, like, wow, this moment, like, wow, this moment really went to a place that I wasn't expecting, or, like, wow, like, the two of you sound like you're having so much fun, it's really wonderful to hear, or, like, wow, this was really powerful and it made me cry a little bit. Like, getting to that emotional place for the listener, I think, is the thing that really, really gets me. That's the thing that gets me on the deepest level.
It's funny to hear you say that, because I think that it's almost, and I'm going to be very careful with what I say here. I don't want to imply that Party of One is not a show for the audience. Every show is for the audience on some level. That's the point of making a show. And we had this conversation earlier in this interview. But what's so fascinating, I think, and what is so interesting about the Party of One experience is that it really feels, and I can say this as a listener and as a guest of the show, it really feels like the show is for the guest. And I think that creating that emotional experience for the listener is almost really just a happy coincidence. You know, it's really more of a side effect than it is the intention. And I think that's also why episodes that are just about displaying the functionality of a game don't necessarily hit. One, because in actual play, period, you're never getting an accurate picture of how the game works. And I say this as somebody who has listened to actual plays to learn game mechanics. Of course, it's a very good way to hear it done in action and to sort of wrap your head around what that game could be. But everybody who's making an actual play of a game is not playing the game as written. There's changes there to the way that you approach it to tell a cohesive story and the way that you play it to fit it into a window of time that will make a compelling episode of something. There's ways that you approach the beats. There's ways that you kind of ignore like encumbrance rules or things like that. And it's really about getting to the heart of something there. So I think that that's what intrigues me so much about the TM Party of One difference. And the process there, and the piece of your process that I've always been the most curious about, is the way that you select games. So for anybody who doesn't know, who hasn't been a guest on Party of One, when you go on Party of One, there is, at least, I don't know if your process has changed since the last time I was on, but initially, I know that you had this sort of brief questionnaire of things to sort of fill out for consideration. And then you as guest are served, you know, to order a game sort of selected for that episode, for that experience. And my first time on Party of One, I barely knew you. I think this was like one of the first full conversations we had was on Party of One. And you had picked for me this game called In the Air Tonight, which is a spindle wheel reskin, essentially. Great game. Loved it. But it was so fun. And it really struck me that this game ended up being such this perfect nexus point for all of these shared preoccupations that you and I have gone on to then explore in like every other thing we've ever sat down at a table to talk about together. You know, we had these ideas about like the extractive abuse by capitalism of like American communities and like the tension and guilt of hometown expectations and sacrifice and redemption and atonement. And it was just like this really crazy little intense
hoverboat races.
Hoverboat races, of course, which have come up more times than not. I think there's been a houseboat in like 3 out of 4.
I think everything we've done has had some degree of a houseboat, which is incredible.
Yeah, which is great. Really, really good odds there. But I think that was just such a remarkable thing because, you know, it wasn't a game that I had designed. It wasn't a game that had anything to do with anything I was working on really at the time. But it was just this perfect encapsulation of all of these things that I loved to talk about. And part of that, obviously, is that you have preoccupations that are going to show up again and again, no matter what, in all of the stories that you tell. And I think that's part of what makes Party of One so interesting and so vulnerable is that you have these themes that will come up no matter how hard you try to control the person that comes out on the other side of it. But for you, as a person who, again, it doesn't have the luxury of getting to intimately know every person before you sit down at that table, how do you approach that game selection process? And I don't just mean like logistically, you know, I have a library of this and that and the other thing. I mean, like, what does that intuition look like for you? What is happening internally when you get that feeling of, yes, this is the right one? How do you know?
It's an excellent question. The process has not fundamentally changed since the last time that you were a guest. The guest form is really still the starting place through which I like get all of the information that I need. I will shamelessly shout out that a quote that I've carried with me deep in my soul is a quote from, it was via email, so I don't have I can't name this person, but all I will say is like a luminary in the tabletop actual play space. A quote that I hold on to is a quote that just said, "Jeff, these onboarding materials are incredible, and I wish every podcast made it as easy to get ready to be a guest as this, as what you've presented me here." And as a consummate organizer, felt like I could rip a phone book in half. But like, to me, if Party of One is an interview, that is really where the crux of the interview happens, is in like both asking the guest in the guest form the 2-part question of like, what about your work do you want to talk about? Like, what is it that you do that you are like sharing with the audience? And also, what are the things that you like in games?
Mm-hmm.
And then marrying that with the question, marrying both of those questions with my own internal question of like, what do I want to talk about with this guest? I think a prime using the example of present company, because I think,
Mm-hmm.
because you bring it up, like it's a case where like we had not really spoken, I think, more than once or twice in person, but like we had been Twitter mutuals and like had many long conversations on social media,
Uh-huh.
to the point where like I felt like I had a good idea. And like when we sat down to talk, I think I originally messaged you like, hey, do you want to come on Party of One, while I was at jury duty? I don't know why that's the image that's in my head, but I
I
was
did
like
not know that.
sitting in the
That's
jury
hilarious.
room. I was sitting in the jury room and I was like, I should message Alex. I should see if Alex wants to come on Party of One. But I think this is a good example of identifying those preoccupations, but also saying like, what do I want to talk about with Alex?
Mm-hmm.
What's the conversation that I want us to have? You know, it's funny. This is a big revelation point for me along these lines, and a big like crystallizing factor of what makes Party of One an interview, but also like crystallizing this process. I think the other very good example, or the other very good like reference point that I come back to again and again and again and again and again. I could tell even from the earliest days of the show that the wrestling episodes hit different.
Mm-hmm.
That like whenever I would pitch a guest, whenever I knew that a guest really loved professional wrestling, and I could pitch them a game that involved professional wrestling, and when we sat down to record, those episodes just hit different. The energy in the room was just different, and you could feel it in the finished product that like this was playing a different type of experience. This was a different type of vibe. And the more that I came to understand the show, the more that I've come to understand like the work of identifying a game and like the ways in which that is part of the interview, the more I've realized the reason for that is because I have identified a thing that the guest is so passionate about that they're going to let their guard down, and they're going to like offer that excitement to the audience, that in as much the place where the show becomes for the audience is like bringing the guest and bringing myself to a place where we are sharing an unbridled sort of excitement. That can be an excitement about a fandom. That can be an excitement about a preoccupation. It can be an excitement about an emotional space. Like I've gotten messages from guests in the guest form that are like, let's get fucking sad. Like,
Yeah.
let's cry. And like being excited to be in that space, that you're so emotional that you're crying. Like that you're offering that to the audience. And so like a big part of it is saying, what do I want to have wrestling excitement with? Like what do I want to gleefully gush with my guest about? What do I want to sit down with my friend Alex and like be very excited and giddy and emotional and like really swing for the fences about, and sort of like kind of like fearlessly lean forward and really lean in about what's going to be the topic that is going to make us really let loose and really like it's what's going to make the game fall away a little bit when we're both just so in it that like we can't help but throw ideas and throw conversations, and like what's going to bring all of that to the forefront. And so for me, a lot of it is thinking about what is it about their like what is it about their work that makes me want to sit down with this person? Why do I want to be sitting down with this guest? What is it that I share with this guest? What is it that I am excited to share with this guest? What is it that I am excited to put in front of this guest that's going to make them feel a little vulnerable but also deeply excited? Like, what are the preoccupations that are going to really connect with? What's the thing? What's the frequency that's going to make us both kind of lose our minds a little bit? And like then it's I go to the library of games. I go to itch.io and I'm like, okay, what gets me closest to that vibe?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm thinking about game topic, I'm like, that's the goal. How do I get there? And then I find the game that most speaks to that. I knew that you and I had a preoccupation, not just for all the things that you mentioned, but like on a very like surface level, we both had a preoccupation with a specific sort of like retro sleazy detective
Oh,
story.
100%.
Lovingly described, we both have a preoccupation with beach detectives, and this was a game about that sequence in Miami Vice when they're driving the car. Like I was like on it, like, so there's multiple levels of like, I know we're going to go to a lot of interesting places, but also I know that this is a fun thing that we're both going to latch onto and really really lean into, and like it's going to drive us into that place, and it's going to cause us both to show off that guard lowered vulnerability of, this is play, this is us indulging in our most playful impulses, and like finding those opportunities to say, okay, this is the thing that's going to make this person really like really feel playful, is to me the driving factor. Whether that and I, this is a thing that I always ask in the guest form, is like, do you want this episode to be in conversation with your work, or is this an experience that is wholly divorced from what you do? And part of that is saying like, there are guests that talking about the art that they make, or like or engaging in the art that they make, are the highest play that they can achieve. You know, one of my favorite guests and also dearest friends, Jadzia Axelrod, wonderful comic book writer, loves superheroes, I would say more than I do, which I feel like is a feat. And getting to like play around in the superhero space with Jadzia is a joy, and I know that she loves it and is excited to play in that playground, because that's where her playground is.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where she's like, yeah, obviously she's like, I can riff on this for days. And even though her work is in superheroes, like it's not where she's never feels like it, she never feels like it's work.
Right.
But at the same time, I've had plenty of guests where I've been like, here's a thing that is kind of directly in conversation with the work that you do, and they're like, I'm way more excited by this other option that you pitched that has nothing to do with that, because I like fantasy stories. I like doing weird, grimy, dungeon crawly kind of games, and like they're like, I'm gonna have more of a playful experience doing that than I will it'll feel like I'm at work if I'm doing superheroes. And so like getting into that space is another big part of it.
Yeah, I feel like there's anybody who has played at a table for a long time, or, a good table for a long time. I hope everybody's had this moment. I guess I can't guarantee it. But I feel like if you've played at a table for a long time, inevitably in a campaign, you'll reach a point of synergy where you can kind of anticipate and build toward those great, huge, really rewarding and satisfying moments together. And they feel so special because you've put in the hours and you've put in the time to not only understand and anticipate how that person works and what they're interested in and what really lights them up as a player or as a GM. But when you have, one episode or two episodes to get to that point and make that magic happen, and it's with a different person every single time, I feel like that choice of game and that implicit innate enthusiasm for not even just the plot of the story you're telling, but the style of story and the genre of story has to lock in so much faster. And that game becomes a really core part of reaching that zenith as quickly as you do. But it also means that you're on this constant like high, 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 high every episode. Do you find that difficult to sustain that kind of energy and that excitement? Or does kind of having that much variety built into it keep that challenge alive for you?
Great question. I feel like to me, the thing I think that sustains it, or that makes that easy to sustain, isn't really even the variety as much as it is the inherent constraint of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I with a given guest, I've gotta sustain that high for 90 minutes. You know, like
Mhm.
the variety plays a part of that, but it also plays a part of that of like I am delivering that high to a different person, and it becomes a very different experience. You know what I mean? Like the variety I think is part of that. And part of that is that like I am not inherently sustaining that high across. I feel like I've struggled more to maintain that high in even like off mic games that I've played like over long periods
Mhm.
than I do with Party of One, because with Party of One, it's like I got my guest, we got 90 minutes, we have one episode, we're gonna hit that high, we're gonna leave nothing on the table. And like that to me, like go being like we're gonna go 60 miles an hour, like we're gonna go 0 to 60, we're gonna hit the beats, and there's not really it's freedom from the concern that I need to leave anything else on the table.
Mhm.
If I'm playing a longer term game or telling a longer term story, like there's this feeling of if I blow my load too quickly, if I play my cards too quickly, I won't have anything left for later. And I have to kind of like savor the build towards these big moments. I don't really have that privilege when I've got an hour. So it's do the thing now, get to the big emotional place now, and then get to reap the rewards immediately. And then I know that 3 days from now I'm gonna do the same thing with a different guest, and it'll be it like, and that variety is part of it, and also we're gonna have this experience once, and like I can just get straight to the fun stuff.
Yeah. No, I love that way of thinking about it. And that makes a lot of sense, because that pacing really is the hardest thing to sustain, as I think as a GM, certainly. I've done a lot of GMing.
Hmm.
And as a player, it's hard to keep that going if you don't have other players around you to kind of rely on. When you have that luxury of saying there's other people in this party and it's their turn to sort of have a moment in the sun, or that kind of back and forth of being able to rely on those folks to help make those decisions. It's very different stakes when you are the one other person at the table. But to that note, I think it's very easy to give you your flowers as a host or as a GM or as a showrunner, because that's sort of primarily the way that you sound like you conceive of the work that you do. But by the same coin, I want to hold space for the fact that you are an incredibly experienced player. You have, like, I mean, I don't want to nail down these numbers, but mathematically, there are great statistical odds that you have played more different kinds of games than probably 99.5% of people on Earth. So, are there any like characters that you have really loved playing along the way that you wish you could have spent more time with?
This is such a good question. I've been racking my brain. This is the question that you
This is the
pitched to
only
me and
question
said
I gave
like
Jeff in advance, by the way.
you were like sit with this in advance.
Well, I knew. I mean, like,
I
that's hundreds of characters, right? Like, this
Yeah,
is this is 10 years of individual characters that you have played.
and like the answer is the answer I keep coming back to is almost all of them is the cop out answer, but
Oh, it is a cop
also
out
there
answer,
is
Jeff. But speak on that.
uh like to me there is a, and I think the more accurate answer is like not almost all of them, but like probably about half of
Uh
them,
huh.
I think is the more honest answer of like there are every time I have had to end a session, and this gets back to like when I feel like we didn't, or if I feel like we didn't like finish the story, is to me the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like this gets back to, leaving it all on the table, leaving nothing behind. This gets back to uh feeling like I finished the interview. I can think of one really specific example, and I think it's emblematic of the whole. This is certainly not the only time this has happened.
Sure.
But I think there's a very good example. We played the game Capers Covert. It was like a 60s spy game with superheroes. And we're telling this great story. We're doing all of these fun scenes. And we reach a moment where we realize we're just out of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not and we're just kind of like, we're really deep in it. And we're like, well, we're at 90 minutes. I don't want this to go on longer. So maybe we just include like a quick cliffhanger here and we call it a day and we wonder what will happen to this character next. And it kind of, to me, felt incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really, what this question really gets at for me is like how important that closing beat of an episode is. Or the if I could go back and revisit things and do things differently, the characters that I come back to are the ones where I don't feel like we finished whatever story we were telling. The characters where I was like, oh, I can't wait for this big moment with this character. Oh, well, I guess we got to a cliffhanger. We're not really going to see how this all pays off. I think like it gets, like I said, it gets to that feeling of wanting to make sure you left it all on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realistically know that the odds that I come back to a given story, given game, given character, given guest are not especially high. And so if I feel like I've left a story on the table, if I feel like I have not hit the big emotional beats that I have promised myself with a specific character, I find I come back to those ones far more than I come back to stories where I'm like, oh, this character was so much fun that I would love to see more out of this character. I don't feel like I got narrative resolution to this character's story.
Yeah.
I feel like that story where it was like 60s spies, I was a 60s spy doing a casino heist with like weird superpowers, it being in that space and then going, yeah, but we didn't see the moment where, like, we didn't see the big getaway, we didn't see the final showdown, we didn't see all of the things that I know you going back to shared preoccupations. The beats that I know that you are immediately thinking about when you hear heist things, because we both love heist stories.
100%.
Like, those are the things that make me go like, oh, I really wish I could have gotten like another episode or two out of that. And like, those are the ones where I'm like, I just feel like we could have gone further. And it, in thinking about this question over the last day, like, I think that what has really stuck out to me is the moments when I felt like we were too focused on telling the story in a linear fashion that is similar to how other actual plays present their stories,
mm-hmm.
and not being willing to break form a little bit, not being willing to like being too into individual scenes and not being willing to go like, okay, what I want to do is this. The moment that I care about is like this character with their back to the wall when they've got to like make the big getaway and they've got to use their powers and the odds are against them and they've got to get the hell out of this casino.
Right.
And not letting that conversation take center stage, instead letting the structure of an actual play story take center stage. Those are the moments that I come back to and I'm like, I really wish that we had like I wish that I had like skipped the story ahead.
Yeah.
Or I wish that I had like fiddled with time to like get to the place that is the moment that this character really shines.
Sure, because realistically, when you're bouncing around from genre to genre and kind of convention to convention, not all types of story are created equal in the sense that those main moments are going to happen over a 90-minute linear plot, right? Some of those genres really require you to get to very specific places in order to feel satisfied. In 10 years, do you feel like there are any types of story that you haven't gotten to tell that you'd like to, or any types of characters that you haven't gotten to play, or not even gotten to, but that you haven't played?
Really excellent. There is one genre that we've never done on the show that I've always wanted to, and just the opportunity has never fully presented itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it partially came up because I love to challenge myself and say, you know, what genres. I love to do recommendation threads on social media, or I did back when social media was fun. Like, being like, give me a genre. Tell me what genre of story you want to hear. I'm going to throw you the episode that I think hits that vibe. The one that has always stuck in my craw, and I've never quite found the right guest game combo to really make it happen, is a medical drama.
Oh, yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird gap that is always kind of, somebody was like, give me your best medical drama episode. And I was like, I don't actually have one. And like, just that one gap in the backlog has just always kind of hovered with me. And it's just never, the opportunity has never presented itself. And that's been the one genre that I've always been like, I should get around to that. And then 6 months will go by and I go, I should probably still get around to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's such a specific and fun one, too. Do you have a dream guest in mind for that episode, or has that just not really come about yet?
Hasn't really come about yet. I think that's part of it also, is like, I just haven't found the guest who I would want to sit down with and be like, let's talk about what we like about trashy medical drama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, now it's going to be sticking in my craw, too. I'm going to be unrested until I can see and hear and touch the Party of One medical drama episode.
Now it's in your brain. Now I've passed on the It Follows curse to you.
Yes, thank you for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that. That's what a gift. Yeah, okay. Well, I want to be respectful of your time as guest here today, but there are a few more things I want to hit on real quick. And one of those, which I know is important to you too, as you consider for the sake of the show, it's easy to conceive of Party of One as being a one-person project or even a two-person project where, you know, those components are you and the guest. But really, I happen to know that Party of One is very much, at bare minimum, a three-person endeavor.
It is a three-person operation.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
The show wouldn't happen without Jen. Like, Jen is the invisible hand by which the show exists. I mentioned it earlier, but like, the show was fundamentally her idea.
Mm-hmm.
She was the one that, when we sat down 10 years ago and said, like, let's make a podcast, what would it be about? Like, this was the seed of an idea that she threw out. And both, like, logistically, in terms of, you know, she edits half of the episodes. I think that she's editing an episode as I am recording this audio. She, you know, so like, we share the editing, but also like, there is a real sense of understanding the implicit logistics of the show, and like, the show exists as an ongoing conversation between she and I, and also like the lineup of guests is a conversation where she and I will sit down and say, like, who are people that we are excited to sit down with? Like, are there names that we want to pitch? And, you know, we'll both throw out names and I'll send some emails and make episodes happen. Like, and I think most crucially, there is a conversation that happens about once every 6 months. Whenever we take a break, whenever we like take a break for a couple weeks, and there's a conversation that Jen and I have of, hey, are we still having fun? Like, that was 10 years ago. The thing that we said was the determining factor of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we come back to that question about every 6 months, and we have like an honest conversation about, like, are we liking this? Is this hitting? Like, are we bored or burnt out yet?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that question is ever yes, then all right, then we say that's all she wrote. Like, but at the same time, like, we sit down and we also say, like, are we happy with all of the parts of this? Like, what do we want to be doing differently? Like, talking through that vision of what the show is very important to both of us, and is very important to me, because to your point, it is as much hers as it is mine, and I want us both to be happy with it. And like, none of this happens without her being there for every one of these conversations to say, hey, this is what I want us to be doing, or this is what we should be doing, or hey, or just asking, like, Jeff, what do you want to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, both of those, like, all of those questions, that is the show is the result of both of us working on this and making a thing that we're passionate about and that makes us happy. And I think it's maybe not immediately apparent to the listener, but it's immediately apparent to me because I see the episode lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the lineup of a given episode is, I think, the lineup of the schedule is, I think, the clearest example that this is like a 2-person creative endeavor. Because Jen doesn't like editing what she describes as the sad boy episodes. I love sadness and being sad. I find that being sad kicks ass. And so if you look at the lineup of the show, if you look at the flow of the show.
This is your secret insider opinions that we can tell from now on, like, who edits which episodes in advance.
You'll once you hear this, you can spot a Jen episode from a mile away, and I'll spot it mid-recording, and I'll walk out of my office and say to Jen, "That's a you episode. I'm putting that. That's you're editing that episode." Did that with an episode that I recorded last week, that's going to come out this week. The episode we recorded with Mike Schubert, like, is peak Jen episode because it's funny and it's goofy and it's about a bunch of things that Jen likes. And like, I was like, she's going to have such a fun time listening to that episode that's going to make the edit seamless. The other episode that we're releasing this week is The Time We Have with Elliot Davis, which is a game about 2 brothers in the zombie apocalypse, one of whom has been bitten by a zombie and is going to turn in an hour, and you're having a conversation through a closed door. That's the most Jeff episode that could possibly exist because it's about being sad. And so, like, if you look at the lineup of episodes, you look at the release cadence of the show, eventually you'll start to notice that, like, the lighthearted, goofier, funnier, lighter episodes tend to exactly intersperse with the sadder, heavier, like, darker episodes. And that's because we hand off editing on a week-by-week basis.
So that's not just like a meta thing about pacing. That's like, there's a logistical reason for that.
It is both of those things at once. It is worked out to where the pacing is making sure that we're not overloading one style of episode or the other, because we each have our episodes that we like. And from a planning perspective, it means that I'm when I'm thinking about episodes or when I'm thinking about guests to reach out to, I'm also thinking about, okay, I've got this episode booked. I know the game that we're going to play. I know the creator and their work. This is going to be an emotional slog. And I say that affectionately as the person that's going to edit that, and that's going to be sad for 2 hours and then sad for another 3 hours as I edit. It forces me to then go, okay, I got to find like a lighthearted, fun guest that we're going to do a light episode with so that I can hand an episode to Jen that she's going to love, so that we're both editing episodes that are going to make us happy. And like that shared vision of the show and having our preferences, having our predilections, having the things that we want to be doing shapes the image of the show. And so you see over the course of the 10 years of Party of One that it is both of our predilections taking shape, and none of that happens without Jen being there for every conversation.
That's an interesting thing. And not just in the sort of cadence and course of it, but for folks who may not have made a product like this before, it is an incredibly intimate relationship to have with an editor. You know, that is a foundational trust element. And not everybody is capable of handing off that level of trust, but not everybody is capable of finding a person with whom they really love that end product. You know, I've worked with a couple different editors. I've done my own editing at different points. And it is really such a fascinating thing how much that story is shaped by the editing process. And there have been, you know, sessions I've recorded where I'm like, that was not good. And then I listen to the edit that comes out of it and I say, that was incredible. Or, you know, vice versa. I've had episodes, something where I've recorded and I've been like, oh, I'm really like, I love some of the bantery stuff or the offbeat stuff that happened here. And you hand it off to an editor who might clean all of that out because they don't see that as being crucial to the end product. So that shared vision and that alignment is really, really big. But also when you're dealing with something as fundamentally intimate and vulnerable as the format that Party of One has, I feel like there's such an interesting balance to keep there of, what stays in and what doesn't. And those tiniest of details, those tiniest of edits can really make a huge world of difference in that. But also simultaneously, it is an enormous kudos to Jen that she does this work and really appreciates and loves this work, because it is not easy for everyone, I feel, to listen to their significant other having these incredibly deep, personal, intimate, vulnerable discussions, conversations. It's a two-person game. Statistically, some of the time they're going to be romances. Like, that's just the nature of the show. And, I've worked on shows with people I've been very close with. I've worked on shows with significant others, and it's not always easy to do. Not everybody has that level of trust and that shared commitment to the story and the vision as a realization of that shared trust and what can exist in that space. And so I just, I want to take a moment to make sure everybody really understands the magnitude of her contributions here. That is enormous, both at and away from the table.
It's remarkable. It is consistently, to the point about like the way that editing can shape things. I remember, I learned audio editing in college. I had a class on like media production that like taught me. They were like, we're gonna use Audacity because it's free, but it's not good, and if you ever like seriously pursue this, you shouldn't use it. And I was like, well, I know the free software, so I'm gonna use it. And 10 years later, to the chagrin of every audio professional that I know, you can guess what I edited. But I remember like when I edited the first like maybe 10 episodes by myself, and Jen had been involved in a lot of the conversations, but like she was like, hey, what else can I be doing? She's like, I want to be like more involved. And I was like, you can take on some editing if you want. Like, I can show you. And I gave her a 10-minute clip of an episode. And I remember handing it to her, and I was like, I showed her like how to do the basic edit stuff. And I was like, take this 10 minutes, edit it, show me like how you would, like what you would do with this episode to kind of like help like teach and kind of give feedback. And I remember she took a segment where a character was giving an unhinged like bragging speech where he was like trying to hype up some kids about a fitness routine. And he was like, the line I remember was, he goes like, you're gonna you work with me, you're gonna have peaks, you're gonna be freaks. And like he said like two or three other things, but he put like these pauses to kind of like emphasize like the gravity of it. And I remember like I handed this to Jen to see what she did, and when I listened back, she had completely cut the pauses out of it in a way that made it 10 times funnier. Like as a comedic object, because it went from him being like saying each line like he thought it was the coolest thing in the world, but she was listening, she's like, I listened to it and I realized it was a lot funnier if he just sounds like he's got this thing rattled off. So it turned into from like going like, you're gonna have peaks, you're gonna be freaks, to you're gonna have peaks, you're gonna be freaks. And like the comedic rhythm of it, I was like, it takes so much like the mindset requires so much skill to not just like go in and edit the audio and like clean it up and make sure you're cutting out like pauses and technical gaps, but to then go, what's the rhythm? Like to then like have that editorial voice already intact and be like, what's going to sound funniest to me? Like what's going to amplify this moment? Like what is the guest trying for, and how do I get them where they're going? That I was immediately like, cool, there's nothing I can teach you. You've done better than you edited that episode better than I edited that episode. And so like, and being able to like listen to all of these episodes and like give actionable feedback, like being able to be like, hey Jeff, like just so you know, like she'll kind of flag me sometimes and be like, just so you know, like I don't know, like just so you're aware of this, like you've in the last couple episodes, like you've been so excited to jump in on things that you've been talking over your guest, and like take some time to like pause and like really like let them finish their thought before you take over. And I was like, that's really thoughtful. I didn't realize I was doing that. And like being focused so much on the process, like it's a remarkable thing, and it makes the show infinitely better because it means that like I'm getting advice from an award nominated audio editor, from an award winning editor that's telling me like, hey, here's things about your performance that you don't realize that you're doing. I'm spotting it, and I'm telling you that like it's going to hit harder if you go at it like this. It's the greatest.
Yeah. That's it's hard to cultivate that kind of artistic relationship with somebody, but when you find that spark and that natural ability to have those conversations there, cherish it. That is that is a gift that you should keep as long as you possibly can.
It's what makes the show. It's what makes the show special, and it's the light of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't mind, I have a quick question for future you.
Yes.
So, future Jeff, have you given any thought mechanically to what the end of Party of One looks like? Like, how do you want to land this plane?
I have. And increasingly, I think it's just... I think what I don't want is to end the show... This is the most real that I can be. I've listened to a few shows that have done this, and I understand why they've done it. There have been a myriad of reasons why each of these shows has ended the show in this way. And like to an extent, part of it is because they've had to have ended the show this way. And my biggest hope is that I don't get to a place where I have to do this. I don't want to end with a 5-minute episode.
Yeah.
And by that I mean I don't want to end I don't want the final episode of the show to be a 5-minute episode that loads onto people's feeds, and it's me holding back tears and saying, "Hey guys, I got an update. There will be no future episodes of the show. Thank you so much for hanging out. I can't say more. Thank you." I think my biggest thing is that I don't want that. Like, I want to land the plane. I don't want to eject from the plane. And like, I understand why, like, I understand what leads to the 5-minute final episode. I get it. I've been in the conversations with several of those podcasters where like, I know that is the decision that they had to make, and that it breaks their heart to make those decisions. And that sometimes that's life dealing you a hand, and you kind of just have to run with it. What the thing that I most don't want is, if I'm going to land the plane, I want to land the plane, and I want to end on a note that makes me happy. Like, I want my final recording of the show. I want to know, right? Like, I want to know it's my final episode. And B, I want to be able to express in the language that I've spoken for the last 10 years, which is 2-player interview actual play, the gratitude that I feel. Whether that is through like a funky solo game with just me and my own memories of the show, or with a guest that I treasure, like, I want to know it's coming. I want to have like a game this is the final beat of the story that we have, the meta story that we have told, and that I get to say goodbye by way of doing the thing one last time. Like, that's to me the biggest priority, is that the show has existed in the format of 2-player actual play, and I want to say goodbye through 2-player actual play. I don't want to just say goodbye. It feels like the show deserves more than that, especially at this point.
Yeah. It's good stuff, man.
Somehow this is way more vulnerable than like if we were playing a game. At like 3 different points of this, I was like, man, I wish we were playing a game right now. I wish I could escape into a game right now.
I wish I could make this a character's problem and not mine.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, for, sharing that vulnerability with me and letting me have it on a plane that does not obfuscate through die rolls or card mechanics or anything like that. I've really enjoyed getting to talk to you about the work that you do and about the work that you admire and the work that you foresee for yourself and aspire to. But I've also just really enjoyed, getting to be a part in some small way of this evolution over the past few years into what Party of One has become and sort of the realization of what it can be. And also just getting to, enjoy and benefit from your company as a friend and your work as an artist. It's really been fantastic to see. And I hope that if there are 10 more years of Party of One left in it, then all of them get to take you to all of the same places and so many new ones that you can't have possibly foreseen. But I hope that whenever you do reach that endpoint, you are able to rest secure in the knowledge that it's been exactly as many of those years as it needed to be and not a moment more.
I mean, at the end of the day, you just said it really well. At the end of the day, I've made a bunch of friends, and like that's the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what it is. And if there's 10 more years in this thing, which I have no reason to believe that there's not at this moment, I hope I make a lot more friends. Well, Alex, thank you so much for sitting down. This was everything that I wanted it to be and then some. And because I know that I could just like say ending and goodbye, but it doesn't feel right if we're on this call together to not get to do the thing and get you to hear the thing that I have loved doing for the last 10 years. So I am going to throw it over to me in the future so that he can wrap up with the show. Take it, future me. Somehow that bit has not stopped being funny in 10 years, and I hope it never does.
That's the important thing. If it's as long as it's still making you laugh, that's one person out there who needs to keep doing it.
That's exactly it. Thanks, Past Me, and thanks to Alex for joining me for this interview. As I said at the top of the episode, when I had this idea, and when I was thinking about the 10th anniversary, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do for it, I faced the question of, like, if I want to just sit down for an interview and really deep dive on the topic, who do I want to have that conversation with? Who do I trust to know the show? And also, who do I feel comfortable, like, sharing that vulnerability with and also celebrating this incredible milestone with? Like, who do I want to be sitting down for as we take this little tiny victory lap in the name of the podcast? And I'm completely genuine when I say Alex was the first name on that list. So truly, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I'm not going to bother with all the usual call to actions. You'll hear those on the episodes before this. You'll hear this on the episodes after. All I will say here is Party of One is produced and edited, as always, by Jeff Stormer and Jen Frank. Music for this episode comes from the Game Boy game RoboCop and was composed by Jonathan Dunn. Thank you again for listening. As always, remember to fight the forces of fascism every single day. Remember that self-love and self-care are radical and defiant acts of resistance. And as always, party on, everybody.